continuing our series about finding out where we came from and who we are. The title of this is, Who Am I? And it's good for people to question who they are. That's exactly the way I started out on this spiritual journey I've been on in 1972. I read a book that stimulated me to begin earnestly asking that question. I spent days and days walking around and meditating on it. I was into formal meditation then, and it became my one question I asked myself. And I'll tell you that doing that over time opened a river in me that has continued until this day. To find out who we really are, we must be willing to rid ourselves of our self-idols of who we think we are. Any spiritual discipline will tell you this. When I first began, I had a teacher who first started me into the practice of yoga, and then into Zen meditation, which we call Zazen, and then finally, we both moved from there into Jesus Christ. We were deadly serious in what we were doing, because we knew it was a matter of life and death, not for fad, not for fashion, and not to be cool, but truly a matter of life and death. We just had to know. The first day that I went to see my friend, who for a couple of years was my teacher, he said to me, "If you want this, you must be in earnest and completely serious. Everybody is stuck in the mud," he said, "but most people are just playing in it. Only a few really want to get out of it." I told him I did. When I say serious, I don't mean that we don't live life in joy. Because if we really do seek to know who we are, we do find joy. But there is also a place for sorrow as well. We find that it all works together. To really find out, it's going to cost you everything. Jesus said, "He who loses his life will find it, and he who seeks to save it will lose it." When you think about it, an artist obsessed with his art, a musician hearing only his music, and a writer possessed by the things he writes, we call them geniuses, savants, prodigies. They may make us uncomfortable, but we like to be close enough to them to let some of it rub off on us, since we often see them as a notch above us or beyond the rest of us. We imaginate ourselves into their creativity, into their arts, their music, their writings. But a person obsessed with talking about God, however, often threatens us because we think he might make us confront ourselves and upset our fragile, thin veneer of self-satisfaction, which we often defend with great righteous indignation should we become even for a moment suspicious that someone is trying to get into our precious self-citadel. "No apple carts upset here, thank you very much." So we would rather shut the crazy person of God down. "Good riddance, off to the loony bin. He's too much this, he's not enough that, he doesn't do this, he does too much of that," we shout. No one like that could really know God. We want a nice God, a fair God, a cool God, one who thinks like we do. So we shop around for one of those kinds of gods, like shopping for a computer, looking for the features and benefits we like. And when we find one we like, we take him home for a while and try him out. And if we don't find one out there shopping in all the God shopping places, we might try to make our own, fashion a God for ourselves, of our own making, who is nice to us, accepts us, says what we want it to say, and does what we want it to do. This nice God doesn't make us confront ourselves, doesn't upset our apple carts, and lets us stay to our heart's content in anything that satisfies us. He always tells us, all is well. That's why we are offended with those who come to us with a God who demands something else of us, who demands truth, who demands righteousness, who demands real love, which is self-sacrificing without regard for self-love from us. That God is too upsetting, because if we look at ourselves as we truly are, we might find out we are really none of those things that we think we are. Like the man who won't go to the doctor because he's afraid he'll find out he has cancer. We'd rather not know we are not really those things, that we are not really truth, that we are not really righteous, that we are not really true love. Perhaps we'd like to be, but honesty might just come up with a different answer than what we'd like to think. So we throw out God's crazy lunatic, God's prophet. Call him crazy, a lunatic, a fanatic. We're glad to be rid of him, so we can continue on in our self-made comfort. We'll just hope for the best and leave it at that. But we don't have to. The Word, goes out into all the world. God calls each of us through His Word. And to respond, we have to be willing to let go of ourselves, to quit being our own judges of things, and accept a higher judgment, whatever it might be. Now, I'm telling you that Jesus is that Word. And when we discover Him as that true Word, we're not ashamed of Him. He eventually becomes everything to us, in us, and finally as us. There is no other. But one cannot ever know that intellectually because it cannot ever be known by our natural thinking mind. One only knows by letting go of himself and plunging in. And when we plunge in, the Spirit reveals the true God because He can only be revealed. We become obsessed then with only God. God in Christ, reconciling the world to Himself through His cross. Because His love is so true and so real, even though we killed Him, because we didn't want Him upsetting our self-apple carts, He has redeemed us by the same death that we dealt to Him. What great love is that? He rose out of death, bodily and truly, that we might know that when we lose what we think is ourselves in Him, let go finally of what we fight so hard and vehemently to defend and keep. When we lose that into Him, He rises in what we have lost in Him and becomes one with us inside ourselves, so that His truth is now our truth. His righteousness now becomes our righteousness, and His love becomes our love. We realize for the first time everything before was upside down and askew. Now through Him, everything becomes right side up, and we surprisingly say, I never knew. Oh, how wonderful. And such an obsession we have inherited. For we say with Paul, this one thing I do, forgetting those things which lie behind, and reaching forth unto those things which lie before, I press toward the mark for the prize of the high calling of God in Christ Jesus. When we are there, we are out of other options. We are obsessed with the right obsession. It eats us up. And the prize isn't some heavenly mansion or crowns and gold on high, but the lives of our brothers and sisters who are pulled to safety out of the fires of destruction. We care for nothing else. Thank you.